very much for the very kind invitation to speak this morning. My topic was, is there life after COVID? And really I wanted to cover three areas. Firstly, just a few reflections of the last year, what our experience has been as Dorset Community Action. Secondly, I want to give you a little sneak preview of our own Dorset-based survey of the sector, just to give you a few headlines there and how things have changed the last 12 months. And finally, I think three things I believe need to happen now for us to really go forward to actually undertake a full recovery from really what's been quite an interesting, traumatic, whatever adjective you want to use, 12 months. So if you don't know who DCA, Dorset Community Action is, I think I describe ourselves as really the main business support organisation for the not-for-profit sector in Dorset. So, for example, if you had any questions around fundraising or governance or how to recruit trustees, you might come to us for support. And secondly, very much a role about bringing small organisations together in networks of self-support, networks of organisations. And I'm guessing about 75 to 80% of the organisations we support are on the small end of the scale. It's a very similar place to where Rita's organisation is. So what do we think about the last 12 months? I dare say that each of you got your own reflections and what's been particularly pertinent to you as individuals and organisations. But I think for me, three things really stood out. I think the first one is you couldn't miss just the unbelievable response from local organisations responding to the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, and the ability to get support out to local people in need was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the rise of the mutual aid groups, yes, it was nationwide, but also in Dorset it was significant, and just really just took your breath away. It was impressive. I think at a national level, we have to give thanks that government did put some funding into the VCSE Emergencies Partnership, which was a national response led at a national level by NAVCA and the British Red Cross. And we are a very small part at a local level as part of that partnership. But I think you've got to say that actually the local response absolutely knocked it out the park compared to any national response. And I believe that a lot of it was about really, what we really noticed in Dorset was the putting in place the local structures to support that local response. And certainly in Dorset Council area, while I was not myself directly involved in the actual implementation, because I'm very lucky, I've got an operations manager that helps me out, Dorset Council did a fantastic job, in my view, actually facilitating, bringing together those key organisations from our sector to help facilitate delivery of the emergency response at a local level. And I think it's so important to have that local infrastructure in place, which actually supports this delivery. So that's number one. Number two, pace of change. For my organisation, I've got to give extra special thanks to my team, how they possibly kept up with the almost seemingly at some stages, literally daily changes in national policy dictates coming down. And you sat there thinking, how on earth do we actually interpret all this lot and make sense of it for people who are just running community centres or buildings or running any kind of service in our communities? And for us, just keeping pace was enormously challenging. And I've got to say we're really, really lucky as an organisation because we're part of the ACRE National Network, and ACRE stands for Action with Communities in Rural England. And ACRE are quite well plugged into DEFRA as a central government department, for example. And they've got particular policy specialists, so absolutely valuable to be plugged into that national level. So we were getting really policy news as soon as we could get it. And the ACRE guys were giving their interpretation, then it was sort of coming down to us at a local level. So, again, having that infrastructure in place, enormously helpful for us to be able to respond. And I think really the other thing about pace of change is not quite a concern from our perspective as an organisation, but how do we stay relevant? Things are changing so rapidly, and Rita just talked just now about the challenges about funding, absolutely spot on. But that's been coming for the last 5 to 6 years, and COVID's just added an extra layer of challenge on top of that. And how do we stay relevant in areas like funding? How do we support organisations to move away from grant-based models to a more mixed economy? So pace of change and staying relevant, number two. Number three, I think for me, was the freedom to deliver. I was fortunate to be part of the Building Health Partnerships steering group down here in Dorset, and really what that partnership has been doing in the last couple of years is bringing together frontline people who just deliver health and social care services, just anything from social care professionals to third sector people to health professionals. And we ran 2 workshops last year. And what really noticed was that actually there was this almost like this childlike rediscovery of the joy of work, the fact actually, yeah, we can get shot of the red tape and we can just do stuff. How wonderful. And it was great to see. And I think it was reflected also in the flexible approach of a lot of grant givers about just getting money out there to where it counts. Let's just, okay, we've got to manage risk, we've got to do all that stuff, but let's actually make it easier for people. And it was great to see, and I do hope that actually we do retain the very best of what's happened, the way we've changed our working ways the last 12 months, and continue that sort of freedom to deliver and to work together and put aside the egos and just get it done. So those are a few reflections. I dare say you've got your own individual reflections as both individuals and organisations. But now I just want to try a little screen share, because second part, I want to just go on to give you a quick snapshot, sneak preview of our local sector survey in Dorset. So I'm just going to go into screen sharing here. There we are. So I've just got 3 simple slides here. Now, this time last year, we conducted a survey of the sector in Dorset, in the Dorset Council area. And there's some very interesting statistics and trends. And where we are at the moment is we've in the process, in the middle of actually conducting this follow-up survey, and the survey is yet to close. But I just wanted to give you a quick sneak preview of where the trends are going compared to last year and what's happening right now, and just take through some of the headlines and highlights there. So the first question here, if you look at the graph, the horizontal axis with the percentages, that's just literally the percentage of total number of respondents to the survey so far. And up the vertical axis was how people currently describe the status of their organisation, very simply. Now, what's really interesting is, and what's significant is, you look at the top there, that dark blue bar. So those organisations that have said they are currently completely mothballed and closed, just over 30%. Now, what's interesting is that this time last year, that figure was about 41%. So we have seen a reduction over the last 12 months in those organisations that have mothballed. But you've got to say, 30% or so organisations mothballed, it's still a considerable question for us as a sector. And what will happen to those organisations ultimately? I think what's also interesting is that on the positive side, if you look at that sort of red bar, third from the bottom, that should say, you can't fully see the annotation there, but it should say that organisations who are delivering more services, and that's just under 20% there. And that's an increase from last time. I think about last time there was about 12% of organisations said they were doing more, and now it's 20%. So it's clear that, I think as Rita said earlier on, it is a mixed bag. We do have organisations in our sector in Dorset who have been doing more, during the last 12 months. Now, of course, the question is, are they doing more with sufficient funding to do more? That's always the big question for us as small organisations. So just scrolling down to slide number 2. So the next question was, did you apply for any COVID-19 related funding? And I guess when we're talking about COVID-19 related funding, we're talking about government grants that had come down through Dorset Council, were administered through the council. It could be access to specific COVID-19 related funding from grant giving trusts or the big lottery, for example. And I guess what's heartening is that just over 60% said, yeah, we've applied or we've been successful in securing funding. And I know for my organisation, we've made sure we have secured our own funding. We've had particular challenges, particularly with, if people know, our centre in Wimborne, which is a community learning resource centre, Clark in Wimborne. We've always run that on very much a training and enterprise basis. We get no grant subsidy to run that place. And we've had some considerable challenges. The impact on us of the lockdowns have been significant. So for us to have some government funding to help us start to reposition that service has been essential, because without it, we would have had some significant challenges. And we have to give thanks again to Dorset Council, who have very, very quickly administered this funding, no questions asked, and well, all the right questions asked, but have really facilitated that process very quickly. But I think what's also significant is if you look down at that turquoise bar, second from the bottom, these are groups saying, actually, there was no suitable funding for us. Or the bottom bar, we didn't have time to actually apply for any funding. And I think that has to be concerning. It's still an ongoing concern. And the reason being is I think that for a lot of organisations, I think what was particularly noticeable during the first period of the last 12 months was that as soon as the first lockdowns hit, a lot of funders, I have to say, did rush over to what I describe as the same side as the Covid-19 playing pitch, in that they were funding just purely emergency responses to Covid-19 lockdown. So, for example, I don't know, delivering services, delivering food parcels to people, that type of thing. And of course, what was missing was ongoing funding to support those organisations that still provide a vital social care, healthcare, social service to our communities, who were not providing services which were directly providing emergency response to Covid-19. And that has to be a concern. And I think that blue bar has gone down slightly since the first survey, but the fact it's still up to about 30% of organisations saying there's no suitable funding for us has to be an ongoing concern. And I know I've discussed this with local reps and Big Lottery, also our good friends at the Dorset Community Foundation. But if there are any funders in the room today, please do take notice of that, because we still appear to need to put a plan in place about actually how we start to recover from this current situation and to support organisations going forward. And just the final little graph. This is quite a pertinent one. How long will you be able to keep operational without emergency funds to help? Now, the last survey, 64% of organisations said they would be at risk of permanent closure within 12 months. So you've got to say that, again, what's slightly pleasing, the trend is getting better, is that you've got just over 55% of organisations here saying that, yeah, they think they can go longer than 12 months, and which means that all the other collective bars above that, about 45% of organisations said, actually, we think we can carry on up to 12 months, but questionable whether we can do that after that. So again, that 45% figure now was 64 12 months ago. So you've got to say that's an improvement. The trend is going in the right direction, but it's still a challenge for the sector. And you've got to say, looking at the top of the graph there are still organisations there saying, anything from imminent closure up to 3 to 6 months. That is a fair chunk of respondents. And, that's something we must keep aware of. So I think that's just a little snapshot. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and just go back to speaking to you. So lots going on. There's no doubt it's been a challenging time. But I do believe there are 3 things, in my view, that should happen if we're going to fully recover from the last 12 months. And I think a lot of learning has been taken from the last 12 months. Number 1, I think there's something fundamental about the ongoing nurturing of bottom-up and grassroots leadership. I really do. I mean, let's be frank about it. And this is not a party political statement, but certainly from a national policy level, we've had years of failed promises about devolving power down to us at a local level, encouraging that local decision making. I mean, anybody hear of David Cameron's Big Society? I'm sure we all did. But the reality was that, there's been a big society within our sector for decades in this country, a tremendous track record and history of this. And it's just unfortunate sometimes that for political reasons, these types of ways of working are co-opted and branded. And I think we still have challenges about centralisation of funding. And I'll give you one example. I'm not sure whether anybody here delivers employment support type contracts, so supporting unemployed people back into work or providing training. If you do, you may be aware of the Restart programme, which is this big national programme to support long-term unemployed people back into work, which is absolutely needed. Do not get me wrong, absolutely needed at this current time. But the challenge, of course, has been at the Restart. What the Restart programme has done is that these contracts have been supersized into multi-county size lots. And what came out of the recent awards for the winners of the competition to actually deliver these services was that, of course, with such huge contract sizes, the majority of organisations winning these contracts were multinational, national, Australian and American companies. And what it's really meant is that for us as a sector, one of the things we do fantastically is at a local level, supporting people back into work or self-employment using anything from volunteering through to some fantastic training support services to some fantastic organizations delivering support for people learning disabilities, whether it's catering type enterprises, whatever it may be, offer training courses, getting people real skills which really make a difference in their communities. And frankly, we've been left out in the cold once again. So it's something we're sort of keeping an eye on, but we do have concerns about this. I think on the flip side, though, I think we do have to take responsibility as a sector. We shouldn't just be looking nationally to solve our issues. I think that's a mistake. I think we've got a responsibility to actually work better, certainly in Dorset as a sector, and more collectively. And the classic example at the moment is that some of you may be familiar with the Community Renewal Fund, which is this big national funding, which will be the predecessor of the Shared Prosperity Fund, which was replacing European funding starting April next year. Now, admittedly, Dorset is not a 100 of these priority areas that government have set, and it's a ludicrous timescale to actually deliver a project between sort of now and the end of March next year, which has real meaning and impact. But I think from what I picked up, certainly engaging with our good colleagues at Dorset Council who are sort of managing the grant bidding process locally, there might well be stuff that's going on I'm not aware of, but I'm not aware of actually many partnerships really working collectively together to really see if we can get some money into Dorset, and more importantly, just to prepare ourselves for next year for the Shared Prosperity Fund. Because if we don't get ourselves sorted out, then I think we will get left behind. And I do believe, coming back to, we talked about structures, it's so important that we work on this. Now, I don't know whether many of you are football supporters. Shamefully, this is a public admission, I am an Arsenal supporter. I know, someone's got to do it. And it's not a good time to be an Arsenal supporter right now, believe me. But you would have heard of the European Super League proposal, which was this proposal by, I think, the top sort of 8 to 10 clubs in both in England and Europe to create a breakaway league. And it was very much driven by the oligarchs, these multi-billionaire owners of these football clubs. And what we saw was very quickly a huge pushback by supporters of these clubs, ex-players, pundits on TV. There was a mobilization of people in a fairly structured way, in an organized way, to actually repel this perceived invasion by these billionaires on our national game. And they won. They kicked the idea out. Within probably 24 hours, these billionaires were started to run away with tail between their legs. And they won. And you might say the national sport was saved. So what's the point of this to Dorset? I think the point is, again, about creating those local structures. We're stronger together. If we can work at that, then we've got a chance to actually come out the other side of this current 12-month period into a stronger recovery. Point number 2, what must happen? Yeah, it's the funding and resourcing word. Now, for those of you who know me, you're probably going to, oh God, Alex is going off on one again. He's talking about funding. He's having a moan again. Probably am, actually. But ultimately, while it's been fantastic, that certainly the last 12 months is that there has been a genuine recognition of the value of our sector to actually support the wider system delivering health and social care services. I think for the first time since I've been here in Dorset in my longer time in the sector, this is the first time we've really got that recognition of the value, the fabulous work that we do. But part of that is, if we're to continue to engage on a sustainable basis with the integrated care system or any of the local systems delivering health and social care, for example, we do need to be resourced. And some of you may be thinking, well, he's going a bit chicken little in this, isn't he, really? In past years, we ran a conference, and often there'd be a title of the conference such as, Dorset Third Sector, on the cliff edge. Well, it kind of brought the punters in, I guess. But I think the point is that while I think I've been just the ongoing amazement at the resilience of the sector for the last 12 months, how we've adapted. And we always said we were adaptable. We've done it yet again. But we are working with a sector under considerable stress. And you only have to see, the survey results I've just showed you just there about those organisations saying there's no funding for them at the moment that's relevant to their organisation. And, I was sat at my desk about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I received a round robin email from a well-known or respected colleague, a local organisation providing support services, employment support services for young people mainly, announcing they'll be folding in July. And that, I've got to tell you, took me aback. It really did. And we're a small community here in Dorset. And when you see an organisation there where I think the last 12 months has probably been the proverbial icing on the cake in terms of actually driving them over the edge, then we know that we've got considerable challenges still as a sector. And I guess my request to our statutory sector partners is, yes, I know we keep asking this question, and I know it may seem a bit challenging and something we don't want to talk about, but if we do generally want to cement the fantastic work, the partnership working over the last 12 months, then we must look at resourcing, and we must do it collectively. I think the final thing I wanted to say is that, again, back to our responsibility. Now that we've got their attention, we've acknowledged that we've got a place now at the table that's genuine respect for the work that we do. But the thing is, if we're not able to articulate properly the experiences of us as organisations, as a sector, and the trends that are hitting our communities, if we're not able to tell our collective story more effectively, then how can we plan to actually recover from this particular 12-month period? How can we plan more effective service delivery if we're not sharing essential data on what's happening, say, in Bridport or Sturminster, what's happening with unemployment levels, numbers of income claimants, numbers of people experiencing domestic violence, all those indicators of communities who need our support. And I think that we do have some further work to do as a sector to work more collectively if we can. And I do appreciate it. It's tough. If you're running a small organisation, it's just often you come in on a day and you just want to get through the day and make sure your organisation's okay. And you don't have the energy. We don't have the energy. I don't have the energy at times myself to say, okay, we need to make the effort to work more collectively as a sector, to go and talk with our colleagues to prepare a way forward. And I think as part of them telling that story, just a little request. So we mentioned the survey earlier on. It's still live. It was just a sneak preview, but we would like more people to actually respond to the survey. And the survey this year is covering not just the Dorset Council area, but also our good colleagues at CAN, Community Action Network, covering Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. They're also promoting the survey. So we'd love organisations from the conurbation to respond. So we'd love it if you could, if you haven't completed the survey. Yes, I think Rita did mention survey fatigue earlier on. What I will say is we do actually do something with the survey results. So the report from last time, it went into the hands of the Lloyds Bank Foundation at a national level. They've expressed an interest in working in Dorset in the past. They've expressed a genuine interest. They're fantastic supporters of small charities, and a load of research reports they produce, and also grant funding available for charities. We put it in the hands of the lottery. We've had discussions with members, certainly here in Dorset, to council, some of the decision-making members and leadership about this is what's happening to the sector. People are genuinely interested now. They really are. So if you were able to help us out, I think the survey will take you probably about 10-15 minutes and be really appreciated. I think we're due to put the survey link in the chat in a minute. And I'm sure it'll go out with the show notes after this conference today for you to complete. But it'd be so much appreciated. Help us tell the story, help us make the case for a long-term recovery for the sector. So really, I'm just going to finish now. I had an interesting conversation with some of my Southwest colleagues about 3 or 4 months ago. We had a bit of a Southwest get-together. And it was interesting. We were talking about our various experiences of how our relationships have changed with particularly local authorities as a result of the last 12 months. And There were a whole range of experiences from, on the one hand, really not great through to absolutely fantastic. And I think in Dorset, I think you got to say we're fortunately at the slightly higher level there, been really, really good. But I think there was a further conversation saying, okay, now that we've had our skills recognised, people can see what we can deliver, how we can really generally be part of the system and support our communities. Now's the time, frankly, not to wimp out. Now's the time, if we're being asked for expertise, we do need to be funded for our expertise, and we should actually ask for our expertise to be funded. And if I was a car mechanic, I'd charge £45 an hour. Why should not I, as an expert within this sector? And I think something about the phrase which was used was, we've got to hold the line. Not be militant, we've still got to work with local partners, but actually now's the time for us to step out of the light and not be embarrassed or shy of what we can do as organisations, and have the courage to actually speak up when we need to. In short, we've got much to be proud of within our sector. So I think for us, finally, I think the message from me is we need to take the initiative, not wait for an increasingly centralised political system to rescue us. We know we've got the ability, we know we can pull it together. And I think if we can do that, then only then will there be life after COVID-19.